Acts 15, as you may realize, is the classic passage in all the Bible on broader church assemblies. If, as Galatians 4 verse 26 declares, Jerusalem which is above is the mother of us all, then the Jerusalem assembly in Acts 15 is the mother of presbyteries and general assemblies, classes and synods, and even ecumenical councils. And so Acts 15 has proven a battleground in debates on church government and broader assemblies involving the Reformed and the Presbyterians on one side, and then Congregationalists and Independents, and Episcopalians, like the Church of England with the bishops and so forth, and the Papists. And if this series of sermons had church government for its theme, we would go into this important subject, and Acts 15 in particular, in great depth. We would explain the various positions of the groups, what the Roman Catholics hold, the Episcopalians, the Congregationalists, and the Reformed. We look at the various arguments adduced for these various positions, and then we would explain why the Reformed and Presbyterian view, which we hold, is biblical. But church polity, or church government, is not the subject of this series or this sermon, so we won't be doing this. Maybe we will on some other occasion. I don't know. Instead, we're focusing in this series on the relationship between Jerusalem and Antioch. We're going to consider, therefore, Acts 15 from this perspective, emphasizing the elements in the passage that help us grasp the relationship of these, the two greatest churches in the early apostolic age. But we will bring in some issues of church government in our treatment of Acts 15 as they occur and fit in with our theme. Let me remind you, so to speak, of the story so far. We saw at the very start of this series Antioch's becoming Jerusalem's daughter church through the witness of persecuted and scattered saints from Jerusalem and the labours of Barnabas sent from Jerusalem. Then we considered the mutually beneficial relationship between the churches at Jerusalem and Antioch through teaching, prophesying, and offerings, how they help each other. And so it was that the first two sermons in this series focused on the last dozen verses of Acts 11. Next, we noted the different callings of the two churches, how God providentially led the church in Jerusalem through persecution at the hands of Herod, although Antioch doubtless had its measure of persecution too. And on the other hand, Antioch was more involved in missionary work, though the church at Jerusalem was to a lesser extent as well. And roughly speaking, the third sermon covered Acts 12 and the opening few verses of Acts 13. That's the first three sermons in the series. Then, in sermons 4 through 6, we focused on Antioch's missionary work in Acts 13 and 14. We looked at the sending of Antioch's missionaries, Paul and Barnabas, sermon 4. The methods of Antioch's missionaries, sermon 5, and the difficulties and report of Antioch's missionaries, sermon 6. And throughout the whole, we made references to this congregation, the Limerick Reformed Fellowship, and sometimes also our sister church, the CPRC. Now, in Acts 15, our text this morning, Jerusalem and Antioch are very obviously presented in close conjunction. In part, in reaction to the success of Antioch's mission work with the Gentiles, some people from Judea, and remember Jerusalem is the largest city at the center of Judea, some from Judea head north to Antioch, spreading false doctrine in opposition to the Catholic or universal gospel. They don't like what the missionaries are doing. They object to it on theological grounds, and they stir up trouble. And so, an assembly at Jerusalem is convened to deal authoritatively with this problem. So the delegates from Antioch in the north head south and then meet up with the elders and apostles in Jerusalem to discuss and debate the issue, to formulate a decision, and then to disseminate this, and so deal with the false doctrine and unite the various churches and further the mission work. So we come to Antioch and Jerusalem, part 7, as we look at the Jerusalem assembly. First of all, we'll consider the occasion of the Jerusalem assembly. That's, by and large, the first 5 verses of Acts 15. Then the discussion at the Antioch, at the Jerusalem assembly, verses 6 through 21. And finally, the decisions of the Jerusalem assembly in verses 22 through 35. We'll be briefer on this because we're going to pick up and develop some of those things at the start of the next sermon in the series next week, Lord willing. The Jerusalem assembly then, first of all, its occasion, secondly, its discussions, and thirdly, its decisions. Now, up until Acts 15, as far as we know, all the leaders who have come from Judea and Jerusalem to teach in Antioch have very obviously helped the daughter church and built them up in the truth and in unity in Jesus Christ. At the very start of the series, we looked at Barnabas, sent from Jerusalem. Soon after the work in Antioch began, he forwarded the church in Antioch. And then second, a delegation of prophets from Jerusalem, including Agabus, headed north. And Agabus prophesied of a famine in Judea, which occasioned the generous overflow of an offering from Antioch to Jerusalem and Judea. Both of those events happened at the end of Acts 11. So the men who have come from Jerusalem to Antioch have all helped. Like the men that have come here from the CPRC have helped us. But now in Acts 15, and for the first time, false teaching comes to Antioch from Judea. Acts 15 verse 1 reads, "Certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved." Now what was their doctrine? Circumcision is necessary to be saved, even for Gentiles. And I dare say that would put many of us here this morning outside the kingdom of God. And then, as verse 24 explains it further, you also, not just circumcision, but you also had to keep the Mosaic law. And if you don't do both those things, you're lost.